beating up the Stour against the tide. There's about 1.5 knots of tide running, but there's a really good breeze, so I'm able to make some way. At sea this would be really hard to deal with, but here the water's completely flat, so it's lovely. Boat just kind of ploughs on against the oncoming water. So we're doing about 2 knots.
For 5 centuries, Harwich has literally guarded the mouths of the Orwell and the Stour, or Stour, however you want to pronounce it. It's always been strategically important. Apart from the Vikings and the Romans, the first people to have a real crack at the place were the Dutch in the 1600s. So Henry VIII, between slaughtering wives, built some forts and redoubts to defend the place. Then there was another burst of fort building in the 17th century, this time against the French, again. And last century, some absolutely massive defences were built here against the Germans. They attacked it during both World Wars, first with Zeppelins in 1915 and again more seriously in the Second World War, when they were joined by the Italian Air Force, such as it was at the time. There are times that as a Brit it seems that almost everyone everywhere has wanted to have a pop at us, and it's not surprising that we became such a warlike nation, and sometimes decided that it was better to get our defence in before we were attacked. For most of last century, as well as being the biggest commercial port in East Anglia, Harwich was also a massive naval base, and there was even an army garrison here. The tiny back streets of Harwich played host to far too many rival factions of testosterone-charged young men, but there were plenty of pubs to slake their thirst, and more than enough prostitutes around to satisfy their more primeval physical needs. If you have the time, the old folks who occupy the benches along the front are more than willing to share a few stories about what a wild place Harwich used to be. The town also has a wonderful church. It's the size of a cathedral. And coastal towns are often big on God. When your loved ones disappear over the horizon, it's good to have somewhere for the womenfolk to go to contemplate the fickle nature of our human existence. And for such a small town, Harwich lost a heck of a lot of young men in both world wars. Now though, the big ships have moved across the harbour to Felixstowe, and the Navy has also left Harwich. All that remains is the ferry to the Hook of Holland, and the newly built wind farm dock, with its really impressive Triffid-like maintenance platform that floats into place and then jacks itself up so that the workers can be level with the gearbox housings on the wind turbines. The new blades are stored in what look like oversized Dexian cradles. Henry Ford would be proud of the way that we're turning the manufacture of these things into a proper industrial process.
I'm on the Stour, which is the border between Essex and Suffolk, because there are 3 rivers come together. Well, there's the Walton Backwaters, which is basically salt marsh behind a spit, and then there are these 2 quite straight rivers that punch up through valleys. It's between reasonably steep bits of land. So instead of marsh and farmland along the edge of the river, now there are trees. Just a completely different feel to the place. How can you sail past this? I mean, you're mad. You're absolutely mad. It does say there's not much water underneath me actually, only 4 feet here.
Just around the corner is a bird reserve close to Copperas Bay. Ask a local and they'll often tell you that copper was produced there. Actually, that's not true. The estuary is always eroding the clay cliff and releasing nodules of iron pyrites, which can be picked up off the beaches and dug out of the mud. 18 pence a hundredweight was the going price at one time, and bloody hard work it must have been too. The nodules are 50% iron and 50% sulphur. In its crystalline form, iron pyrites is beautifully shiny and is often called fool's gold. But these British nodules look more like feces than gold, but there's still good money to be made from them. The iron pyrites was collected and taken by barge to small manufacturing facilities where the nodules were put into 100-foot-long tanks of salt water for 6 years, where they were allowed to decay. 6 years! A modern spreadsheet jockey couldn't cope with such a timescale. Once it had broken down, it produced a liquor, green vitriol, that was boiled under giant furnaces for 20 days, while extra ingots of iron was added. This industry produced a feedstock that was used for producing ink, fixatives for dyes, nitric acid, chlorine for bleaching cloth, and most importantly, as far as the government and the British Empire was concerned, sulphur, which is essential for the production of black gunpowder. It's surprisingly simple stuff to make. 2 parts carbon from charcoal burners in British woodlands, some nitrate from British pigeon coops. Government crap collectors had the right to enter anyone's property and harvest the pigeon droppings. Now that's what I call a job, government crap collector. And finally sulphur, which is plentiful around volcanoes, but they're a bit thin on the ground in the UK, so it used to be imported from Sicily. But to get to the Mediterranean, British ships had to sail past both France and Spain, who were not always on the best of terms with us and were usually keen to stop us getting our hands on too much gunpowder. Hence the importance of an indigenous sulphur industry. It's not an exaggeration to say that British sea power, and therefore our empire, was dependent on humble places like Copperas Bay. And all around our coasts you'll see places called Copperas Point or Copperas Spit, which I think is quite interesting. Maybe it's not, I don't know.
Dinghy sailor, you don't often sail down to leeward when there's a fair amount of wind. And it's really nice to feel the boat heel. I mean, she's really leaning into the work now. Very nice. I'm just going to take you past a very, very weird place. This is Rabness. Well, it's very strange. It looks like a kind of American Wild West town on stilts, stuck beside an estuary. Very odd. It's not really a town actually, all it is some holiday chalets, but nevertheless, you know, people spend a fair amount of time there watching the tide come and go. Think of worse places.
It has a lovely sand and shingle beach. It's a great place for a summer swim. But the architecture is undeniably weird. One part of the beach has public access, but I was stupid enough to land on the second part. A woman came up to me and told me that the beach is private. Well, madam, above high tide level that's possibly the case. But below high tide level in the UK the land belongs to the Crown, so the only person who can tell me to get off it is the Queen herself. The officious Rabness resident told me that the house owners had clubbed together to buy the common land. Man, that makes me unhappy.
Go away. With your stupid tricks. Go on, bugger off. This is a lovely day. It's a beautiful river. Go away. Go away. Look up. I mean, look. This is where he's doing it. He's doing it over this gorgeous, delightful, peaceful, natural place. I've been listening to the birds and now I'm listening to you, you horrible, horrible man.
Further up the Stour is Mistley. What a lovely name. There are some perfect old boatyards where I could easily spend a week just soaking up the local floating architecture. Then there's Mistley Quay. Great cranes and dramatic warehouses, now being converted into desirable residences, and nothing at all wrong with that. Better than Brightlingsea anyway. But all is not well at Mistley. While one end is still in use and visited regularly by coasters that can take the ground, the other end, where the town meets the water, was always available to sailors. But the owners have now decided to fence the whole thing off. Largely, they claim, in the service of the dreaded health and safety, and that makes me unhappy too. I think people should be allowed to fall into the water if they want to. By doing so, they'd be raising the average IQ in Britain. At the top of the navigation is Manningtree, another lovely name and well worth a visit. The inhabitants are a competitive lot. They race small rowing gigs and small yachts, which leave the marks of their keels all over the mud. The navigation is brought to a sudden halt by the railway line.
So this is Manningtree. Been aground once already on the way up. You might be tempted to say, lucky blighter, the weather's come right again when he's sailing. But actually, we've got 4 layers on. This is the beginning of August, 2nd of August. And I've got a fleece and a hoodie on, as well as a shirt and a t-shirt. So, it's a lovely little boat. Someone spent some money on it, but someone's not looking after it now. Still. Canoe stern where they put an outboard on, which is fine.
But beware. You have to leave early, otherwise the tide'll catch you out. Fortunately, it's a lovely place to spend a tide sitting on the mud, and there are always plenty of swans to watch. How do they stay so white when they're surrounded by all that mud? Amazing.
People think of using a tiller pilot only when they're at sea, but actually it's really nice to be able to just, we've got a long river to do, no other boats, pleasant day, wind behind, then it's very nice to use it here as well.
Coming back down the river along the Suffolk side, you pass the Royal Hospital School, which is, or was, a college for the sons of naval officers. 600 boarders and a massive parade ground. I went to a school just around the corner on the Orwell. The two schools were pretty evenly matched when it came to rugby, but when we sailed against each other, we slayed the Navy boys. Now there are girls there too, so maybe they're better at sailing, I don't know. Back down at the mouth of the estuary is Shockley. I was in the Sea Scouts there, and they definitely called the river the Stour, not the Stour, hence my pronunciation. But what do I know? Shockley now has a fine marina, but it used to be a naval training school, HMS Ganges, which the German propaganda machine claimed had been sunk during the Second World War. Try again, lads. The ratings were taught how to obey orders from the young men trained at the much posher Royal Hospital School. All that remains of the training school is a few of the defences, the staff houses and a mast where they trained the ratings in the art of climbing rigging. They'd also be forced to stand in the teeth of the ice-cold North Sea winds and do some carefully choreographed semaphoring. Yet another useless British tradition bites the dust. Maybe not before time either, I guess. Next up, it'll be the Orwell. It's where I was educated, where I learned to sail, where I built my first boat, and played dinghy sailing Russian roulette with the steamers passing up and down the docks at Ipswich. It'll be a sentimental experience, that's for sure.